Stop Starting Over, I wrote a chapter on this. I don't know if you remember it, but we talked about projecting pain. Mm-hmm. So that, I think you just hit the nail on the head because what we're trying to do here is connect the physical to the psychological, right? Because if you can get a perspective on how to change a physical behavior, oftentimes the perspective makes the behavior change easy. If you just try to make the behavior change without a shift in perspective, that's where you have to use willpower, and we all know that willpower has a limited battery charge.
Yes.
Right? I also wrote stuff starting over like the willpower test. Like, okay, yes. If you're somebody that wants to use their willpower, put a big tasty plate of your favorite dessert in the middle of a table in the middle of a room and just walk around it all day and, for like 3 straight days and see if that thing isn't gone and see how much willpower you have at the end of the day. But the sadness, right, that negative emotion can be very useful if we have the perspective that it's useful. If we don't want to shy away from it because, it's sadness, and like, I don't want to feel sadness. But if we reverse engineer the sadness and we can connect that back to your meal plan preparation, mm-hmm. right, we can say, okay, now there's a link to an emotional charge here that's really going to motivate me if I water the seed that we're planting today, if I write this down and I remember it and I use the new perspective as a tool that I was given or that I found, right? The sadness from, maybe, projecting out what that might look like if you didn't meal plan. Like, think about that for a minute. Okay, let's just use the 12-year-old that you gave an example of. But it could be any of your kids, but that was a great example. If you didn't meal prep, think about that for a minute. You just said, screw it. I'm never going to meal prep. I'm just giving up on this whole thing. The giving up on me thing, mm-hmm. right? I'm just going to give in to that. And then your son watches you do that. How does his behavior manifest over the next decade? And if you were to imagine that being the worst possible scenario, where would that end up?
It's kind of scary to think because, and like I've been around so many teenagers, so I mean I could be super dramatic about this, but I mean because this is personal. This isn't just like there's a kid behind every pain when I say these kind of things. But when you have that, you get like the sugar addiction. You eat all this kind of thing, and then you don't have that self-confidence. That's where the drug usage can come in. Because there's a rush, just like a sugar rush. Whatever drugs you want to talk to. So I fear not having that good plan and talk about like this is good for your body and this is we're going to take care of it kind of thing, and being open and honest about it. When you just let kids do whatever they want, it can start off with just addiction to Sour Patch gummies, but then it can be something else very, very quickly because they don't have the self-confidence. They don't feel good about themselves. They don't get involved. They withdraw, mm-hmm. Different things. And then they want an escape, mm-hmm. which is what every addiction is, right? Is something like you say, you're running from something, so you escape into that. So that could be kind of the dramatic thing, but at the same time, like I said, that's a very real story.
You've seen it a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, probably more common than people actually realize when you've been in the school systems for your whole career and seeing hundreds of kids every year kind of graduate into the next level, and you follow them. I'm sure you've seen that, and it's more common.
And I've had a unique perspective in a couple of things. Not everyone's had this, but I've been a lot of times at a middle school or an elementary and then been back with the kids in high school. So, about the time I was joining, I had been at Bailey Middle School and then Huff High School, and like the kids were like, "Are you coming to college with us?" And I was like, "No, we're done. We're done on this." It's happened in Lincoln County too a little bit. So these kids are people. So like I've seen, like I said, the choices are like the giving up and not encouraging them with good behavior and equipping them with the strong tools. That's what we all need. We need tools, and we need open discussions about it, right? Because no one really talked to me about the sweet tea and the fried, country fried steak and mashed potatoes. They just showed up, right? Like it was celebrations were always very heavy driven with foods that are not healthy in any way, shape, or form, right? So we're shifting, but people don't want to talk about, it's like it's the negative thing of like, oh yeah, it doesn't taste as good as country fried steak. Well, it can though, and it does. It's just got to be a different. Your mindset has to completely be open. And if we're not teaching the kids that, if we just kind of hope that they see it in us and we don't talk about it, then they don't know. Again, it's all coming to them, but they don't know how to like categorize it and save it for their tools to use down the road. I worry that he'll maybe just think that the easy way is just all he's worth, right? Like, it's not worth trying to do all this. Like, I don't really deserve this, right? Like, I'll just eat whatever, like the bag of chips or the, whatever, because I don't deserve for anyone to care about me this much.
You start to see how the projection of that pain and the fear that comes from it can be really useful, because what you're starting to do is develop, and I think you already have it because it's pre-developed. You've been thinking about this, I think, quite a bit. Mm-hmm. You have a pre-developed connection there between your behavior today on prepping your meal specifically and the future of the youth around you, and specifically your son. And the more you can take that perspective that you're developing and turn that into a belief, and a belief can be categorized as like an if-then statement, right? Like, if this happens, then this will happen. And it's more certain and it's cemented, and then that becomes what you recite. And that we all get conditioned when we're young to recite whatever our parents wanted us to recite, because they didn't know it. It was auto-suggestion. We just said it. They said it all the time, so we picked it up and we started saying it all the time. It's just introducing a belief on a piece of paper and rereading and rereading and rereading and rereading and rereading until it's there. That it's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. It really is. But the belief that you're writing down has to be the correct one that's solving the problem. And so we can try to develop that. And so I might ask you, what belief do you think that you could develop if you took those two seemingly non-symbiotic things and you put them together to make them symbiotic? What belief would do that? Like, if I don't meal prep, then the worst possible scenario will happen.
And then make it a positive one also, or?
It doesn't have to be positive. Remember, the outcome is to get you to have the behavior of...
well, then is that if I don't meal prep, then my children will develop possible horrible habits.
That's a great place to start.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do it now because it can be more personal than putting it on a podcast. But that's the exact place you should start, at the top of a piece of paper, and give yourself an hour and a half with no phones and no kids and no anything. Like if you're fed up with, if you're to the point where like it's personally painful for you to keep not preparing, ending up in situations where you're not prepared for food, and then look around and you're prepared and killing it in all the other areas, and you're like, hey, what are you doing? Like, how come you can't master this one thing? Then you'll spend 90 minutes if the pain is built up for you. Because 90 minutes out of your life is a long time. But to sit there with a piece of paper and a pen for 90 minutes, write what you just said at the top as the pre-developed belief, and then start to paint that picture. Like, there's a study, I'm going to choke on where it came from, but it talked about a study of thousands of people who were recalling their memories versus like a historic timeline of their life that was rooted in like data and multiple reference points and things like that. And 50% of the people had a belief of their past that wasn't true with the logic that was actually their past, from their birth certificate to their home addresses to all their things. 50% of people were actually making up who they used to be and manufacturing a belief in their head that was absolutely wrong. Right? So it's the power of us being able to persuade ourselves, manipulate ourselves psychologically. I know that kind of sounds like a bad word, but that's what you're doing. You're for a positive intent, right? For a positive outcome that's going to make your life better, your kid's life, the community around you, everybody's life, even if it's just a little bit better. even if it's just 1% better.
1% is better than none.
That's right. And you're gonna definitely go to great lengths to do that, and it will be hard. But to develop that belief, you can start it now, and it will be work. It'll be like we planted a seed today, and then you water it over and over. Same thing goes with goals. Same thing goes. All this stuff that we're talking about on focus meetings, it all goes back to it's so predictable because we're all predictable. We're human beings. If you sat down and roles were reversed, you're going to talk to me about something that I'm struggling with, and you're going to ask the right questions, and you're going to find out that it's because my son or my daughter or my other son or Morgan or all four or just, but you're going to find out that it's because of their loss or gain of love. That's how we're all motivated, and it all boils down back to that, and then you can sprinkle the Burn Boot Camp community on it for me. You could start with my franchise partner. You could tell me all the things, all the love that I'm going to lose from them if I don't change this one behavior, and then when I lose love from them or trust from them, how that trickles down to the trainers and their teams and their families, and then you and then your family. Like you could stack it so high for me that there's so much responsibility on my shoulders that how dare you do something that would be jeopardizing all of that? Like, how dare you, right? Is almost the mentality once you stack up enough evidence that that's a right decision. So